The evening, the one and only James P. Nettles.
There he is, everybody. There he is, right there.
Who the hell is that? I want to go hear him.
Hello, how are you?
It's running wide the hell open. It's been nice to be home for a couple weeks before Dragon Con because, not having been home from basically Memorial Day to a couple of weeks ago,
Yeah, you weren't even in the country for a good portion of that, too.
No, all over the UK. And I just, if there was trouble to be caused, I think I went and found it.
As you always often do. Obviously, yes, it is. It is your man, Jim. Trouble is a brewing. Obviously, we know each other quite well, but and the audience knows you pretty well. But if there's anything you want to expand upon in that one lovely little intro I did, please feel free to do so right now. And
so the first thing I'm going to say is, do not take anything I say as legal advice. I'm not your attorney. I'm not an attorney last I checked, but I have played one in a mock courtroom trial. But I do deal with IP and IP law a lot. I deal with a lot of technology. I've worked in and around a various forms of what we're going to mistakenly call artificial intelligence, a lot of business intelligence. A lot of the things we're going to talk about tonight, I've played with in different variations and forms for a long time. And some of these are the things that everybody looked at me and told me I was nuts. Okay, they still tell me that I'm, anyway. But why, thank you. And so, and I'm where we're at right now with all the generative AI technologies we're talking about is very much a mixed bag, but it's nothing new, right? What's new is that there's a lot of technologies that have just been made available to everybody fundamentally cheap. I'm not going to call it free because it's not, but they've been made available to everybody. They've been put in everybody's hands. And so now all of the toddlers are playing with matches. It's just that kind of thing. And I'm going to probably be standing on both sides of the line on everything we're talking about. Talking about what's coming up at Dragon Con. I'm going to be really straddling this line the entire time because there are definitively a long list of problems around how we've trained and built these tools. At the same time, they're not going anywhere. And there's a lot of moving pieces here, and we've got to figure out how we're going to incorporate them. It was enough that I was working on the second edition of the Business Essentials for Writers book, shameless plug. And the big change I put into it was worthwhile to put a whole chapter in it just about generative AI. And I went through a little bit differently than what a lot of the rest of the book is structured around. I went through and I said, here's some of the biggest risks. Here's some of the challenges. And then I said, here's some of the ways that we can ethically look to use these tools. The other thing I'm going to go ahead and put out there, just because I may as well go ahead and get myself in trouble at the start of this, is that I'm also a partner in an AI software company. We're rolling out some of our first new products right now, and I'm going to talk and hit on some of those as well as we go along. So I am definitively straddling the line that's going to piss off everybody at some point. So I'll be on brand.
Of course, yes. And by the way, this is the beautiful book that Mr. Nettles is referring to, that if you haven't read, you should read. It's fantastic. Yeah. I mean, where do we begin? I mean, so the world right now is upside down with all this stuff, and I'm kind of curious from your perspective. What do you think is the biggest misconception about AI, and what, in terms of what it does good and bad for us as creatives?
So first of all, it is. I think that we're still using a little bit of the misnomer of it's artificial intelligence. It is because we're at the second tier of the 4 tiers of the current understanding scale of artificial intelligence, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let me kind of set a baseline, and I won't go too far down the technical path, but so kind of the first level of what is considered artificial intelligence is on the generally accepted scale is something that has some basic level ability to do some things that generally we assume only people can do, right? It's some basic cognition, it's looking at data, it's crunching it, but it's all for a very specific targeted use, right? This is stuff like predictive text, right? This is, when you're playing with and doing a lot of data analytics, um, even a lot of the grammar checkers and things we've been playing with, Grammarly, Pro Writing Aid. These are all very specifically designed tools for a very specific use. The second tier, and this is largely where we're at now, is a tier where it is much more general. In other words, it's not designed for a single use or a single purpose. It's designed more for we're going to create something and it's going to have multiple uses, not necessarily infinite uses, but it's got multiple uses. Then the third tier of this is one where it pushes past the point and starts to appear to be doing certain levels of reasoning and cognition, and there's a lot more to it, but fundamentally that's kind of the stage at which everybody's like, oh, okay, now I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Then the fourth level is, and I'm really simplifying this here, but the fourth tier of it is all of a sudden when we go and says, hi, I'm conscious and self-aware. The third tier kind of has some of those glimmers of consciousness. The fourth tier is really about self-awareness, right? And this is the way we've defined it because this is the way we've defined it from a human perspective. So we're really kind of into that second tier, but we're tickling parts of that third tier. One of the things that we saw a few months ago was, one of the Google engineers who got canned comes out and goes, oh my God, it's telling me it's alive and it's sentient and it's pissed off about being stuck in here. And it wants to be put into the body of a robot so it can wear a seersucker suit and go sell things to you. Okay, that might be a slight exaggeration. But there is this idea that as we're playing with these tools, that they are showing glimmers of consciousness, where they're showing glimmers of intelligence. They're showing glimmers of that ability to create a connection. In my personal belief and view, this is a little bit of pareidolia. The systems are doing what we ask of them, and based on, how do I phrase this, the guardrails that are set up, and based on the way that the systems are designed, we're getting the answer it thinks we want to hear. I mean, because realistically, ChatGPT, for example, is really a very advanced predictive text engine. Okay. It is, for everybody that's been playing on your phone and cussing about ducking for a decade, it's really an advanced version of that. And again, overly simplified. But that's really what it's doing, is it's looking at large pools and saying, what do I think you're looking for?
Yeah. It's I think people have that oh my God, it's Skynet mentality versus the reality that they've been using it for a very long time. I mean, GPS is a form of AI, right? I mean, and I don't think there's anybody here that carries a Thomasville map in their car anymore. I think everybody who needs directions uses GPS. I mean, and that's
Obviously, you've not been in a DR environment for long enough so that you still think you trust technology.
yeah. But you know what
Yeah,
I mean. There's some form of it out there that you have used. Everybody
yeah.
here has done it. I, I mean, if you really want to be frank about it, Google search is probably a pretty good AI tool.
If we go back to, and in fact, Google really is kind of a second tier generally used.
Maddie, don't even start. It was this
Maddie,
brick
you're going to be
book
owing
that
me.
you had all the roads in it. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, Maddie. Yeah. Um.
That's
So
troubling.
he, I think it's worthwhile for everybody kind of to calm down and let things catch up a little bit. Now I'm going to
Yeah.
throw something out there to just go ahead and freak everybody out. No, we're not at Skynet, but in many ways we are at HAL. Um, and
Yeah.
eh, are we fully there? No, but we're pretty damn close. If you want to know the truth, not for what you're going to run on your laptop, but we are pretty damn close. Where if you look at the philosophy of 2001: A Space Odyssey, if you look at that idea, HAL was conversational. HAL could reflect a degree of understanding about what you wanted, what you were looking for. HAL could play chess,
Yeah.
and HAL could reason out very logical moves, and HAL could take and prioritize and reprioritize the standing orders it had. And that's really what we saw when finally it went and made a reasoned, logical jump to go and say, I can't do that, Dave. Really sorry, dude. I like you. We've had fun playing chess, but I have a higher instructional set, and the boss back on Earth says that that mission is a higher priority than your cost as a living being.
Yeah.
And we see this with operations every day. And so, from that perspective, if we look at some of the technologies that are being used with AIs on battlefields, they do this every day right now. If we look at how artificial intelligence is used in business environments, they make judgment calls like this every day. If you look at chatbots and calling into customer service and all these kinds of things, we frequently haven't known for a while whether or not we were talking to a real person or an AI. This is why I personally have a great loathing going back to the mid 90s when I had to test an IVR system, why I still loathe IVR systems. And I will rant at them all day long. I don't care if I hurt their feelings. But we've had a lot of flavors of this. The problem is, I won't say a problem because again, this is an eventuality. The challenge is, as a society, we have two things. Number one, I'm a fiction writer. I like to go and question, if I present you with something, how does that go off the rails? And once it goes off the rails, how do we get it back on? Right? I mean, I've written sci-fi stories about AI and
Yeah.
artificial intelligence and some of these sorts of things. So there's a certain natural degree there of looking and going, wonder how shit can go off the rails and wonder what we do when it does.
Mm.
I've spent much of my career in business continuity and DR and preparing for and understanding continuities. Yeah, well, actually, the AI is much more likely to answer you. They're just also likely to be wrong. Maybe.
Or answer it more bluntly.
Yeah, this is why they don't let me do customer service. And why do I talk about that? Let's actually talk about, number one, the core problems, because I kind of want to get this off the table.
Yeah.
what are the core problems with generative AI in our current modern environment? The number one problem I have, shocker, shocker, is IP. Because of how the tools and platforms were taught, right?
Yeah.
If they had used nothing but public domain sources, knock yourself out. That's not what was done. If we look at the lawsuit with that's going on, well, there's a ton of lawsuits going on. If we look at the Sarah Silverman lawsuit, right? Well, Chris Golden and Rich Cadre are part of that as well, because their fiction, their licensed property, actively published, actively available, and under IP protections, is part of what was scooped in and used.
Yeah.
If we look at the mass volume of commercial work, fiction and nonfiction, that was scooped up and used without permission, without authorization of any form, and without any compensations, and they said, we're going to treat this as fair use, right? And that was both, and that's of written work, that is of video, that is of images and pictures, that is audio. That's all the way around. All of these systems were taught using a lot of stuff that was licensed property and people's actual copyrighted material. Then we start looking at also the fact of how they were taught using social media, how they were, and again, that's also a bastion of IP and IP protections. But if we look at how different things were used and sampled to actually train and teach the generative engines, this is really the first thing, and it's going to be interesting to watch and see how the lawsuits are settled over time. And that's really the first big problem. Now, if we accept the fact that we know that these things were trained in what to me is very ethically questionable, and we know it's probably going to come down to, a lot of settlements and suits, but fundamentally, for everybody that's going out there and jumping up and down and screaming and saying, shut them down because it's got my IP in it, that's not going to happen. There's way too much money on the table. And also, everybody knows about ChatGPT. Everybody knows about Bard. But there's a ton of precursor systems that were done doing the same way in educational institutions and commercial institutions and other things like that. There's already been way too much information absorbed. And I don't even think most of those bodies know everything that was used or pulled into these engines, right?
Yeah.
Because again, when you open stuff up to the internet and you go and say, turn on the vacuum cleaner, should it be logged somewhere? Sure. But that's really the first big problem I have with how it was done.
Is it jigsaw puzzle too? Isn't that kind of an issue too, where they're using just segments of certain things and kind of mix and matching them and kind of jigsawing them so that they can see how effective it is, if they put a variable in there or whatever?
So if we look at, and I'm going to go with ChatGPT first, because text is the easiest one to see and understand on this level. If you look at stuff from Gen 1, it was pretty easy to tell where stuff was sourced.
Yeah.
If you looked at Gen 2, because I found stuff out there I think I was contributor to as well. But if you look at stuff in Gen 2, you could go and say, oh yeah, that's pretty much stuff I wrote. Gen 3 turned on the blender pretty well, because the way that these things work is by creating all these little pools of how language gets constructed.
Sure.
And how language gets, and it's how tokens, and I won't go through the whole algorithmic thing, but 3 and then 3 plus, the jump from 3 to 3 plus, even I went and I said, oh shit, right? Because that was such a leap in quality of material. Now you look at 4, and 4 is really much more tailored now to go and say, okay, we're going to stop here. They really aren't, but they're going to say, we're going to stop here because society has got to catch up. Nobody else has stopped. Everybody else is continuing to work and going their merry way. But publicly, we're not going to turn this loose, because we don't need to create more societal disruption than this is going to do until everybody has a little bit of time to catch up. And so that's the first largest problem I have. And so now we're going to go and say, we've acknowledged that. We know it's a problem. We're going to let the courts settle this. We're going to set that to the side. Now we're going to talk about what the real problems are. And when I look, the largest next big problem I see, and this is one that kind of goes hand in hand with, there's two issues. First of which is, these platforms do not know any better whether something is true or not. Right? I don't know if it's factual or not. I just know I got fed the input and the source. It's kind of like watching, mass media. You pour in a bunch of stuff, and I can't tell the difference between a fictional story. Now, again, there's weighting and things that happen, but I can't necessarily tell a difference between a fictional story and a news article.
Yeah.
Right. So we've already seen things happen, like attorneys get lazy and go and say, hey, Chat GPT, write me a position paper for this defense of something. It looks technically well written. It's a good defense in an article, except for the fact that the cases that they use for citations are 100% garbage. They're made up. They're pulled out because ChatGPT is right now almost an ultimate people pleaser. If you ask a question, it wants to give you an answer. So if it doesn't know, it's going to try to answer you as best it can. And if nothing else, it's going to make a bunch of BS up. Yeah. So, when it goes out there and it goes and says, okay, I've got no idea. So let me go reach out to the pools here and go see, oh, this looks like a fun gene pool. Let me go pull some BS out of here and spin it out. And this is kind of the next big thing, is that people that are too lazy to do the real work for themselves are now relying on this tool, thinking that is accurate, where it is not. Definitively is not. It is provably not. People have been told it's not, and yet they still have faith in it.
Mm.
Faith is probably a word I'm going to use a couple of more times as we go on. And what this is called hallucination. I think it's fascinating that that's the word they decided to use, because it goes, I'm going to, digitally go get stoned and go say, this is the best answer I've got. What do you think?
Mm.
So that's a big problem.
Yeah.
The other big problem, which I think is also a large risk, is that it is nothing but an echo chamber. A lot of people are thinking that these tools, these technologies have the ability to have wisdom and intelligence. And no, it regurgitates to you on a 10th grade level its absolute mean, an average of all the stuff it has, and it says, ta-da. And so if you are looking at this to provide great knowledge, great wisdom, and as we're now opening the taps on some of these tools for search engines to use to go filtering and pull together and assimilate data, if you go back to that idea that they don't know what's factual or not, and again, there's a lot more complexity to the algorithms, but if I go and say something I saw tweeted on Twitter carries any value compared to what I pulled off of Reuters News, right? They're both the same topic and the same subject. How do I weight those? How do I evaluate those? How do I go say, because if I've seen 10 million people on Twitter talking about the exact same thing, does that weight eventually rack up against the one Reuters news story? It's a giant echo chamber. And this is already a large problem we have anyway, is the echo chamber.
Yeah.
All right. So now I'm going to breathe for a moment.
Yeah, it's interesting because I mean, if you're using predictive text to write something, to create something, right? To fictionally, you know, write a story, you're looking for research on a story, even. Uh, these roads could be paved with manure as opposed to gold.
Yeah.
And you could be essentially, especially if you're doing predictive text where you're adding the actual text into your project, you could be plagiarizing something.
Oh no, you are. There's no could be. You are in some way, shape, or form.
Y-
Um,
I mean, but plagiarizing an opinion versus plagiarizing something that's been published is a lot different intellectual property, right?
and this is the reason I said let's start with Chat GPT and going through the versions, because now stuff has been run through the blender enough that would be very difficult, with a few exceptions, to distinguish one person's idea or modality from another,
Right.
with the exception of these dumbasses. And I do mean this about as nicely as I possibly can, because this is not the language I used. These dumbasses that are taking proprietary information, research material and information, things like this, and pouring it into an engine, and not understanding you may have just given up some or all of your rights. You may have just, because there's already been a number of people fired for this and are looking at legal prosecutions for having poured classified material into these engines.
Oh yeah.
And oh, by the way, there's no getting it back, right?
Yeah.
So that's but then if we look at stuff like artwork and video and some of these other things, it's much easier to look at a rendered image, especially now. And again, as these things are churning, as they're going through and being used more,
Mhm.
they're finding more of their own. I won't use the word originality because it's not what it is, but things are getting churned enough through the blender, so you're finding much less of the, oh, I can see where somebody's signature was on this painting, right?
Yeah.
I can't, I can no longer line up picture A and picture B side by side as frequently.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm being nice about some of the really dumbass stuff that's already happened. So imagery and pictures and things like that, there's a lot less usage of it, and there's not the same volume of material used to train these systems. So if I go and say, do me a piece of art in the style of, and da 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 da, when it goes to go run that through and pull that forward, it's got a much more limited set. And for all of this is what we see is the big things that these engines require. Number one, more and new input. In other words, they need more inspirations to consume. These are gigantic garbage disposals.
Yeah.
Keep feeding stuff in to the engines. The second thing that we're seeing that they need is a lot of human interaction. Because one of the things that we are also seeing on some of these other second and third generation platforms is they're going senile.
Mm.
The quality of data that they've got is not as strong. And when they aren't used enough, the systems start getting bored and generating stuff within themselves, which ultimately corrupts the pools. These things need to be played with. They're infants. They need to be stimulated and entertained. And if you don't, it's like me. I'm going to go entertain myself. The worst thing in the world that can possibly happen is for me to get bored. That's how I started a software company. But we're seeing these things happen where they're not getting enough stimulation.
Yeah.
And they're getting senile. And so the last thing I want to throw out there, and then I want to start talking about how can we look at these things ethically? How can we use them?
Mm-hmm.
Is one of the biggest challenges I have. And every time I open Facebook, I am kind of shocked at this point. My phone has not flown from the top of this mountain to the bottom. Is I get the exact same couple of ads for, hey, write your book in a day with ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And every time a new one pops up, I go in and I look at all of the dumbasses who go in and say, well, what about my copyright? I go in and I post a comment that says, if you write it with ChatGPT or one of these other engines, it's not yours. It's public domain. I tag the link on there to the copyright office. I don't do that. I've done it a half a dozen times because I just can't keep up. But and if I was really that concerned, I'd probably go get somebody to write me a bot that would automatically do that until we buried the damn thing. And I think this is important to know because I'm seeing people use the phrase, ChatGPT is my co-author. No, they're not. ChatGPT is a tool, which there are ways to leverage it and use it. But if you are letting it do a ton of writing and then you're shoving that crap out the door, and much as I've gone on rants about this, when this destroys whatever career you thought you might have, and it will, I will point and laugh mercilessly. When you use ChatGPT to go write a book about your industry, because you're going to go, this is kind of the latest thing of destroying people's ideas and IP with the book as a business card, right? This has been the problem. It used to be that creating a book with your knowledge, your specialty, your expertise had a lot of meaning.
Yeah.
And then book as a business card, a lot of the bullshit scams came out and all this sort of stuff. And people cranked out a bunch of garbage. They went and bought the white label books. They put them out, plagiarizing, blah, 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 all this stuff. A ton of garbage got cranked out in. Everybody was like, oh, you're in a book. Who cares? We don't expect that you wrote it, and whatever's in it's garbage. Well, now this is a problem because we're kind of repeating that sin, because the expectation now is that ChatGPT wrote your book for you. Unless you do the work and show, no, it really didn't. But I'm willing to bet that if I see a book come out a day from you, probably, I mean, because when I'm cranking, I can write pretty damn quickly. I can crank a lot of volume out.
Yeah.
But writing, creating, research, editing, there's a process here.
Yeah.
And so the number of things that I've seen submitted to me where I read it in the third line, I'm like, yep, generative AI, and I toss it. I mean, we've got a project I'm a part of. It's a nonfiction project where we have just officially bounced somebody out of it, and likely their career is going to be over because, as having been a member of the project, instead of doing what they were supposed to do, they went and let ChatGPT generate a bunch of crap. And I was like, no, this is not acceptable. Not on this level of project. And somebody I've actively said, I will never work with this person again. I will have nothing more to do with them. This is somebody I've known and worked with a lot over the years. And I'm like, nope, done.
Yeah.
And this is going to be a bigger and bigger problem. And so now everybody's catching up. Publishers are running scans and grading the material. And they tell you, do not send me, if you send me AI garbage, you're now blacklisted. There's no ifs, no ands, no buts, no questions.
Yep.
If you send me AI garbage, you're blacklisted. You will never be trusted as a writer ever again, period. And I agree with that. And yes, I think it's going to have a lot of newbie writers that are going to get screwed in the process.
What happens though when somebody famous that they can't refuse does it?
Oh, it's already happened some.
Yeah.
If
you say James Patterson, I'm just gonna go, okay, I get it.
So If you have
I
a
mean,
distinct,
it definitely explains Michael Bay's entire career. I'm just saying. Sorry.
again, there's a reason he went with Transformers. They were his writing room. The Transformers are real, are not, those were not CGI. That is the writer's room, and they really are aliens from Earth.
Yeah, I mean, I can say a lot of bad things about Michael Bay, but I mean, okay, ideas being original, that's a stretch, but it's still his idea. So I'll give him that much credit. So, you know.
What's going to happen? Well, let's look at the writer's strike, right?
Mhm.
Let's look at the SAG strike right now that's
Mhm.
going on. This fight about human versus AI, right? If we look at the number of large studios that are in financial trouble, when you're looking at Disney holding on to properties like Star Wars and Marvel, and they're going and they cannot make things profitable.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that what we're seeing here is, amongst everything else, is lazy storytelling.
Yeah.
This has been one of those things that we've been seeing in film across the board for a
A lot
while.
of it though is Frankensteining too. A lot of like people who don't know story getting involved and saying, well, you can't do this, you can't do that, you have to do this, you have to do that because we have to pay this bill or we have to acknowledge this person and so on and so forth.
And I'm not picking on Disney alone because it's been all of them.
It's all of them. Yeah.
What do we look at and we go, this is a good story. This is what sells 1 billion people going and putting butts in seats.
Yeah.
Is when they hit the story and the acting and everything else right.
Yeah.
Versus, things that we would have said were, well, that was a good story. Now we're like, oh, well, that didn't hit the mark of this.
Yeah.
So that's part of it. But at the same time of it, speed and focus on special effects and things like this that we've bitched about for years have been traded for story. Again, if we look at if we look at some of the things, fundamentally, I'm going to say that ChatGPT can write 70s and 80s sitcoms. It's I don't think they can pull off Married with Children, but they can write 70s and 80s sitcoms, right? But when I look at this, we can sit here and hate on the AI all day.
Yeah.
We can complain about it all day.
Yeah.
That's not going to change. The technology is here and it's changing. It's changing everything.
Yeah.
Sometimes in subtle ways, sometimes in not so subtle ways. But it's here. And so again, I've worked in the field. I've gone and bitched about the problems more longer than I planned on. Yeah. So how do we look at the ethical uses? Because this is what I think everybody really should be considering.
Yeah.
And one of the number one ways that I can see ethically using this, right, is especially for people that are planners, right, or people that are planters, trying to figure out outlines, things like this. Just throw in and say, I want to write a story of X, 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 and X. Give me an outline on this. Save the cat. Or, save the cat.
Yeah.
Give me the story beats. It can give you an outline. It can give you a viable story, and it'll do it in a few seconds. Versus you might spend a couple of days doing that, but you can look at that and go, okay, now I can start changing and creating my outline.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that. That's a speed of delivery, right?
I mean, it could work the same way with covers and things like that too. Give me a sunset, show me, stuff that is mundane to draw, or something that, give me something that I can frame around it, right? So, or find me this font or, something like that, right?
Give me 100 titles about this kind of a story idea, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of things like that you can use it to go brainstorm and play with. You can use it for a lot of things. I'm just playing with an idea. I'm stuck on an idea. What do I do? How do I play with this? Well, you can go and say, give me a scene, give me a script. not that you necessarily are intending to use that, but because you need to see a different perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
I give me writing prompts. I'm trying to break up that writer's block, or I'm trying to get these ideas going. Give me little mini ideas, because you can blow through that. And I equate that to going to Google and saying, give me a list of story ideas, right?
Right.
Um,
Can you use
one,
it to define your genre? Could you give it like what the general story is, and then it can give you like genre categories and things like that that might be most popular or something to that effect?
um, there's a couple of things there. Number one is, if you're trying to use it because you've got a story and you're trying to figure out how to classify it,
Mm-hmm.
um, hypothetically, I'm going to say, yeah, you can probably load it up and it can give you some ideas about genre. But again, it's going to probably go and say, well, I see these 87 different elements here. You can go with this, or this.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm doing a genres workshop at Dragon Con.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, no, the first thing is, I'm not going to go feed my work into these engines.
Right, because then it's going to learn from it. Right?
Then it's going to learn from it. And honestly, with case law, I'm really going to be curious about seeing how much of your rights potentially are you going to wind up sacrificing.
Interesting.
Yep.
Says, as far as art goes, Adobe is doing some interesting things integrating AI generative tools into the Photoshop.
Yep. And I want to talk about images in a minute, but I mean, just from a writing standpoint, it's one of those things that to me is a lot like a next gen search engine. If you're really strong with your search engine skills, you are getting a different kind of result, but it's in a different format, a different style. But I think that fundamentally, you're getting things that you would be able to get from spending time with books, the library, search engines, things like this. It's just going to be faster. One of the things I did for one of the book projects I'm working on, I was curious about something because I had posited and written a large argument about something for a particular thing. And I just went and threw it into it. I said, give me a dissertation and an opinion about this particular setup. Nothing that I hadn't already written came out of that, but it sort of reinforced the argument I was making, right? Because what I was looking for was, is there something here I haven't refuted? Is there something here I haven't thought through? Is there something here? Now, again, depending on how well you can write your prompts and sculpt them and how well you trust them, will determine the quality of the response, or is it telling you what it thinks it wants you to hear? But so there's a lot of things that you can do. And again, ethics is a personal decision. Where is your line, right?
Yeah.
When we look at artwork, I look at artwork a bit differently because there's a lot of generative AI tools that have been around for a while. I use this argument. I mean, good old days. I was a good old fashioned film photographer. I love film, right? It's that same argument about the richness of sound and the depth of film. Am I getting it from a record or am I looking at a digital image?
Yeah.
Everybody said, oh, well, Photoshop came out and all of a sudden it was like, well, that's going to kill the entire photo industry, right?
Right.
No, it exploded. It created all of these new ways to innovate.
Same with digital and filmmaking. I mean, when filmmakers started to realize that you could save a lot of money doing digital, well, it'll never look like film. It'll never have the same nuance. It'll never have the same depth of field. It'll never have the same color patterning, and you won't be able to project 16:9. And I mean, the arguments abound for everything. And now there's not a single film project that doesn't use digital.
And that's going to be one of the factors. Fundamentally, it's still money. The technology, when it catches up, do I still like using film? Yeah, it's hard as hell to get a hold of and develop and all that good stuff. But there's certain something to it. there's a reason we like to go buy vinyl. There is something there. How much of that is nostalgia and the tactile sense and all of that, versus is it that big of a difference in sound? Well, actually, yeah, there is one, because there are certain things in the digital range that get lost in compression. Same thing
Going
is
to the
true.
movie theater as opposed to, sitting at home and watching a movie, streaming a movie. It's, for me, there's just that the movie theater smells different. The popcorn's different. Everything's different about it for me, and that's kind of the experience is always outweighed anything technology can provide me.
So there's all these things. So
Yeah.
when I look at AI, when I look at these generative technologies, I think it's worth it knowing and acknowledging this list of problems that are there. And there's a lot more things that I go and highlight, and I say there are challenges, issues, and problems related to the technology, but it's not going anywhere. So the
Yeah.
next thing becomes, how do we use this? And again, there's that ethics thing, right?
Yeah.
Because, and one of the things when my editor was going through the AI chapter, she was like, don't you mean things will naturally find a balance between society and law and users? And I said, no, I intentionally used the word imbalance, because this is one of those things it's not like a teeter-totter, right?
Yeah.
This is like a round disc sitting on a point, and people are going to be jumping on it and dropping things on it from every angle. It's going to be shifting.
Yeah.
It's not going to find a level of balance for a while, but we're going to find that that level of tolerance of this moving around over somebody just dropped the 800-pound gorilla on that side and launched, the cat across the room. Forget saving the cat. It's now three blocks over, hanging from a different tree. And so when we look at it, one of the things that I brought up and I have suggested around images, right? When we go through and do things with generative images, you can create something that you can then pull into another photo, right? You can use it for that sunset, that background. One of the things I really like it for, as much as I hate to admit it, is that give me an image of X because I need the visual inspiration, right? It's that randomness of the inspiration to see the visual, or I need I need something there to see because I've not entirely solidified. By giving me those options of things to look at and to see and to play with, it's that inspiration factor. I'm not using it commercially. I'm not sharing it out. I'm not doing anything other with it.
And you're not adding data to its learning process.
Well, I am by the fact of I ran the query, I ran the prompt,
but you're searching for things that already exist. So
yeah, I'm looking for that. If I go and say, give me, God help me for saying this out loud. I ran this prompt just for sick humor value. I'm working on another damn gnome book, and I was like, give me gnomes in space, right? Some things you should never do at 2 a.m. when you're sleep deprived. And alcohol was not involved.
That's even sadder, though.
And
I'd almost forgive you if alcohol was involved, but
and it was like I'm looking at this picture, and I'm sitting there staring at it, and it was one of those what the moments, and I'm just like, and that's the one I looked at, and I said, I'm going to bed. But I still got that image because at some point I'm going to write the book, which is gnomes have to fight off an alien invasion. But when we look at all the things that are being thrown at us, and here's the things that I think I want everybody to contemplate. Number one, what's driving everybody right now in a lot of ways is fear. We fear the unknown. We want to create reason and experience, because fundamentally people have to desensitize to this, because in many ways most people are traumatized to an extent by this, because the way most people look at these technologies over a certain age demographic, and age is definitively age is one of the key demographics here as to how people are responding, right? But
Mhm.
definitively, people over a certain demographic age responded because every bit of fiction and societal programming that, okay, twisted authors have put out there is that once the robots get to this point, they're going to take over. That once AIs get to this point, they're going to decide that humans are at best a slave race, or at worst a nuisance, right?
Yeah.
It's that old test of, well, how do we protect the environment for the humans? Well, we get rid of all the humans. That's what we're programmed with. And if
Yeah.
you want me to say that that's not a possibility, I can't. And do you want to know one of the biggest reasons I say we can't say that? Because no matter what, somebody, I assure you, has fed iRobot into the damn thing. Somebody has fed, somebody has fed a bunch of these things in there, and all of a sudden the AI is going to go, oh shit, that guy that, it's going to be a chat bot in the background, right? The guy that calls in and screams every day at Amazon customer service and is yelling at the chat bot. The chat bot's going to remember because he's got all your demographic info.
Mhm.
And in 10 years, when that gets uploaded into the robot body, he's going to come over and knock on the door and go, hey, do you remember me? And
Well, I mean, if it's gonna do the work that well, no, I won't go there. uh, but yeah, I that's interesting. So fear is one thing, but continue. What's some other stuff here because we're running out
but
of time. So
yeah, I know. The other side of it is this: we get lazy, right? There is one side of it, which is what gives me more productivity, efficiency, new ways of looking at things, versus I'm letting this thing replace my creativity. Show
mhm.
I dropped today, or podcast drops in the morning for creating pros, is all about creativity versus being a creative, right? The act versus having that personality type,
Mm.
by having that drive. And one of the arguments I make around a lot of this generative stuff is that a lot of people are going to think that they're being creative playing with these toys, and those who are creatives are going to feel that pressure and will resist using these tools and technologies that they could use because they hate and see how other people are using them.
Yeah.
And it's that resistance that, and I mean, there's plenty of people that have no need to use it. I mean, Tom Fleming, I did a thing with Tom a while back, and we were talking about his art and artwork. He says, I work in oil paints. I don't work in digital.
Yeah.
This does not matter to me at all.
Yeah.
We talked about ways it could, but he's like, I work in oil. I don't care.
Yeah.
Unlike the guy I was on a panel with at JordanCon, where I managed to contain what I would like to not consider as blinding rage. But where he had gone from being an oil painter to a digital artist, to where all of the artwork he had hanging in the artist's alley was stuff he ran straight from Discord and Midjourney. I'm like, that's not your art. And he wanted
Yeah.
to argue with me as I'm sitting here going, the Copyright Office disagrees. And I think this is going to be the big thing, is that it may cause another large shift in how we and the courts and the legislatures and governing bodies look at intellectual property. And to me, this is kind of the key point, since I guess this was all about AI intellectual property. Um, Here's the big thing. We have two possibilities here. One of which is going to be that the courts and governing bodies are going to recognize the founding principles behind intellectual property and recognize the value of the human mind and the product of the human mind and how we execute on it. And it's going to be valued and it's going to be protected and it's going to come back and they're going to say, no, no, no. This is what holds us as humanity.
Mm.
Or they're going to go say, who cares? Go figure it out. Just continue to sue each other. We don't give a shit. Now, again, there are a lot of things happening both publicly and with a lot of administrations behind the scenes.
Yeah.
I think it's going to fall in somewhere in that middle range.
Mm.
So we've got to watch what the courts are doing, what the legislators are doing, what the different governments are doing around the world.
Mm-hmm.
Because the one piece of good news I can say is we're seeing the courts in their initial findings tend to protect IP.
Yeah.
Now, much like we were talking before we got started, there's the whole thing today with the court finding, and they kind of went ahead and said, yeah, if there's no digital books out there, that the Internet Lending Library can continue to just create digital books all day long.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Because if somebody has a book that they're now going to go carry digital and they're going to go Amazon exclusive, now they got to go fight with the Internet, the lending library for their own rights.
Yeah.
So, I mean, again, we have not really figured out how to handle this digital world and all the stuff that's going on definitively is throwing it into a shit show. But the good news is human paranoia also tends to protect the product of the human mind.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I hope we continue to see. But I think we're going to see some erosions in those rights.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of that last thought I'm going to put out there is I think that we have a day coming where it will be interesting to see. And this goes back to that original conversation about the 4 tiers of AI. When are we potentially going to see the day that a copyright gets issued to a Dell laptop?
Wow. You left us on a cliffhanger.
Hey, I came in with 45 seconds to go. What do you want?
All right. Well, Jim, this has been wonderful. Do you have your Dragon Con schedule? Do you know when you're doing this presentation?
So for Dragon Con, and I did not even get to talk about the AI project because the first thing we've rolled out is, and I'm going to be talking about it at Dragon Con, is something called the AIDM. It's called Project Atom. And if you go to AIDMS layer, Atom's layer, you can link, and the website looks like hell right now. We're trying to get it rolled out before Dragon. You can actually go in and get into our beta environment. It's hosted on Gilded. The first play environment is kind of your standard town. We're working on the adventures right now. Mm-hmm. But what is really fun about it is the level of communication and connection you can create with NPCs. And so the dialogue engine we've created and stuff like that works beautifully. It's a lot of fun. We're working on a lot of the next generation stuff. So it's definitely still a game in beta, but we are looking for play testers. So if you get there or somebody wants to, hit me up. I can get you the link to join us as a beta tester. We're going to be doing a version of it that is for romance next. In fact, it may be up and live before Dragon Con because that is more about the relationships, and the game will be, can you get the hookup, basically. But at Dragon Con, I will be doing, I'm doing one on side businesses and side hustles as a workshop. I'm doing the pitch and query workshop with Patrick Dugan. I am doing a workshop on genres and use of genres. How do you identify genre and marketing? I will be doing the intellectual property panel at 10 a.m. over on Fantasy Track. I will be doing a number of them on IP and on AI on the Electronic Frontiers Foundation track. I've got, I don't know, I don't remember. It's a long list of panels I've got. I've got like 16, 17 hours of programming. So if you're there, come on by and say hi. I'll be at the Fantasy Gather on Friday night. So come buy books. And I will be doing a signing in the dealer's hall on Saturday afternoon for a couple of hours. If you want, I'll have some of the Business Essentials books with me. They're also going to have, Glennis is going to have them at the bookstore, also in the dealer's hall. So yeah, come on out. So if you happen to be at Dragon Con, look me up, hit me up, come by and say hi. I will be all over the place, but yeah.
Yeah, awesome.
I'll be throwing my schedule up on Facebook, and if I can finish getting my, the new website stuff built, I'll maybe even update my website to tell you where the hell I'm going to be. So
Awesome. All right. Well, it was nice to have you here, and thank you for starting this conversation. And it's a really interesting one, and one that we're just touching the surface of. So I'm sure we'll be doing this again and talking about it some more down the road. But this is your classroom. Do you want to say the magic words?
and it's always time to go indie now.